There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Pale Blue Mama, but you can call me Amanda. One of the hardest things about working in climate science is the fact that here, still in the year 2021, there is debate over both the reality of climate change and the fact that it is anthropogenic in nature. Especially here in America, we see this huge divide between the right and the left about what climate change is, whether or not people caused it, what we need to do to fix it. Is there anything that we can do to fix it? Hell, some people say that we shouldn't at all, that there's nothing to be done, that climate change does not exist at all. Or even if they will admit to it, that, well, it's not humans' fault, so why should we do anything about it? That it hasn't always been that way. In fact, prior to a Supreme Court judgment from a little over a decade ago, there was actual bipartisan debate about climate science and climate change in this country and what to do about it. In 2008, John McCain had a pretty decent environmental platform for his presidential campaign. However, in 2010, that all changed with the Supreme Court decision of Citizens United versus the FEC. What is the Citizens United versus the FEC, and how did that affect how climate change is debated politically in America today, which ends up being how much legislation is passed, how much money is put into scientific research for climate change, and so many other things. Citizens United versus the FEC, or the Federal Elections Commission, was a case brought in front of the Supreme Court in 2009 based on the relationship between campaign finance and free speech. In 2002, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act was passed, which kind of cut down the limit to how much corporations and nonprofits could spend on political campaigns, how much money they could give to one side or the other in order to get them elected. Now, in 2009, when the Citizens United case was first brought forth, it was about Citizens United, who was a conservative nonprofit that had wanted to make a video before the 2008 election basically talking shit about Hillary Clinton because, they wanted Republicans to win. However, advertising this way would in fact be a violation of that 2002 Reform Act. So Citizens United basically argued that their free speech was being trampled on because they were not able to make this advertisement or contribute to campaigns as they saw fit. And in a 5-4 decision, Supreme Court on January 21st, 2010, it was decided that they were going to pull back the 2002 Reform Act and allow for corporations and nonprofits to now spend as much money as they wanted without abandon on any political campaign. Conservative justices defended their position by saying, and I quote, "Such political expenditures, as in corporations dumping irregulated amounts of money into political campaign ads, do not lead to or create the appearance of quid pro quo corruption." I mean, really? They don't think that, a company or corporation or even a nonprofit that gives money to a campaign, and the campaign might feel obligated to, push forward any legislation that benefits that corporation or that nonprofit. They didn't see that as a possibility. Honestly, I think that they knew what they were doing. I think the conservatives saw this as, their way to make a lot of money, which the more money they have, the bigger campaigns they have. The bigger campaigns they have, the more power they will get by winning more of those campaigns. So, they might have dressed it up and said, hey, there's not a problem here. There's nothing wrong with this. It's First Amendment rights. A, we're talking about corporations and nonprofits. We're not talking about people. And B, of course, there is going to be some level of quid pro quo when you're pumping millions of dollars into, a political campaign, you expect something back from that. This brings forward the idea about corporations in America being people, considered people. Now, this is something that you probably heard about a few years ago with the Hobby Lobby case, that the idea of corporate personhood. However, it was the adaptation of the 14th Amendment in the 1860s that actually kind of solidified the idea of corporate personhood in the United States lexicon. The 14th Amendment was first used as a case for corporate personhood in 1886, the Supreme Court case of Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. The legal argument here was that when drafting the 14th Amendment, they kept switching from the word person to citizen. And they used this to say, well, when they said citizen, they meant person. But when they said person, they meant corporation, which is not a really great argument, doesn't make a lot of sense, but they bought it, and hence corporate personhood was kind of born in this country. And it was Citizens United versus the FEC decision that really truly cemented the idea of corporate personhood in modern American politics. It was actually big oil that benefited the most from the Citizens United versus the FEC decision. And you can see the difference in campaign spending between the years 2002 and 2009, and then post the Citizens United FEC decision after 2010. So you can see on this graph here, between 2002 and 2009, fossil fuel campaign contributions were at a low point from decades before, mostly because of the 2002 Reform Act bill. However, once the Citizens United versus FEC ruling was made, fossil fuel companies, Big Oil, was able to put as much money as they wanted into campaigns and basically sway their politicians to pass the legislation that they wanted to pass. In fact, as you can see from these graphs, there was an increase over 1,900% in the amount of money that Big Oil put into campaigns between the years 2006 and 2014. In 2011, only a year after the Supreme Court decision, Big Oil injected $329 million into political campaigns, while also receiving $33 billion in subsidies from the government, which I guess $329 million was money well spent, considering the amount that they got out of it at the end. Now, the Keystone XL pipeline, when introduced, was going to produce less jobs than what an opening of a new restaurant would have produced. However, there was a shit ton of money and time and legislative power pumped into getting this pipeline fast-tracked. By this point in time, the divide between the two sides was complete. And it was the Republicans that were hardcore pushing for the pipeline that was barely going to be profitable, if at all anyway, and was going to cause great damage to the environment and the land around where the pipeline was going to be built. And then there was the left, the Democrats, who for the most part did not want the Keystone XL pipeline to be built. But we know that that was moved forward, most likely because of millions of dollars in campaign contributions. However, luckily that's something that Biden has been able to overturn. As I mentioned before, prior to the Citizens United versus FEC Supreme Court ruling, there was bipartisan debate about climate change and what to do about it. Since 2010, the GOP, generously funded by Big Oil, has basically waged war against actual science in America and the fight against climate change. Fossil fuel companies throw money at politicians, mostly on the right, in order for them to spread misinformation about climate change, in order to obstruct any kind of legislative action fighting against it. How often do you come across a climate denier that will cite a politician as their source of information? Think of Jim Inhofe, the famous senator from Oklahoma that brought the fucking snowball to the Senate floor and said, "What climate change?" That, in fact, happened in 2015 when his side was pushing very hard for the Keystone XL pipeline. Another huge issue that the Supreme Court ruling caused is the fact that this allows for enormous amounts of dark money to be pumped into political campaigns. The Citizens United decision allowed for corporations to donate anonymously and not have to report who, how much, or why they are donating to a political campaign. Corporations like Extraction Oil and Gas, who actually went bankrupt after spending close to $13 million on campaign contributions, admit that they make their political donations, quote, as part of their business strategy to protect their corporate interests. While making $4 million in public contributions, they added on $9.5 million in dark money contributions that the government protected them and allowed them to keep private even during that bankruptcy. Extraction's lawyers said such contributions are made to protect both the current interests of the debtors as well as the debtors' long-term interests. It is likely that the disclosure of the specific recipients of the debtors' contributions would jeopardize many of the debtors' business relationships, which in turn would adversely affect the debtors' business. The public discourse of certain contributions, or lack thereof, would also adversely affect the debtor's long-standing relationship with both state and local governments. What does this mean exactly? What they're saying is that if people knew that they were giving money to certain legislators in order to sway legislation, then the jig is up, I guess. They don't want people to know. If people knew that big oil was paying for all these political campaigns, they would be less apt to believe the politicians' lies about climate change and big oil. Once the Citizens United decision was made, big oil, fossil fuel industry knew exactly who to target when it came to their political campaigns. Who would be more likely to be anti-science, to choose money and power over what is good and right? I'm not trying to say that Democrats are perfect. However, big oil saw more of an opportunity with the right in order to get the legislation they wanted passed, in order to protect themselves, to get the subsidies they wanted, to be able to build any kind of pipeline or coal fire plant. Big oil asked themselves, which political party will be more likely to destroy the planet for their own gain? That was Republicans. Since the 2010 Citizens United ruling, there has been no piece of CO2 regulation legislation has been co-sponsored by Republicans within the Senate. Republicans not only feel indebted to their big oil donors, they also fear retribution from them. The Koch brothers are very good at this. Well, Koch brother, one of them's dead. If somebody on the right refuses to follow their lead, they will throw money at their Republican opponent in order to beat them out. In other words, support us and do what we say, or we're going to give your opponent 10 times more money to make sure that you're blown out of the water. Super PACs also became legal in 2010, which allowed for a kind of money laundering process between big oil and the people they were contributing to. Either way, this one Supreme Court decision ended up throwing a wrench in any kind of climate change action and legislation that we've been able to do for the past more than a decade now. Republicans stand firm on their climate denial. They stand firm saying, this isn't our fault, this isn't our problem, we shouldn't have to do anything about it. They say it's bad for the economy. It's not. We'd actually, once we get over initial infrastructure spending that we need to do in order to change to alternative energy, we would be making much more money with alternative energy than we are with fossil fuels. And we wouldn't have to worry about grabbing tar sand oil out of fucking Canada or importing oil from the Middle East. Maybe there'd be less wars in the Middle East. I don't know. The 2010 Citizens United Supreme Court decision, well, not a lot of people know about, has influenced so much of politics in the last decade, especially when it comes to climate science in general. So what do we do about it? I guess, again, as individuals, we need to tell our legislatures, tell the people that represent us, that we do not stand behind this, that they need to take away the ability for corporations to have more power and more sway than individual citizens' voices, because that's what's happening here. Yes, we are the ones that end up voting in the end for our political candidates, but we're swayed because we listen to the insane lies and rhetoric that, especially the right, are fed by big oil in order to get what they want. I guess that was really all I wanted to talk about today. Do what you can. Talk to your friends and family about them. Let them know that this exists and is a problem. Let our voices be heard. It's important. So that's about it for today. Thanks everyone for coming. And don't forget to think critically. Bye. You see, in 2002, conservative justices, do not lead to or create the appearance of quid pro quo, do not lead to or create the appearance of quid pro quo corruption. Quid pro quo. Why can't I say that word? Quid pro quo corruption. Try that again. I swear to God, how many f***ing garbage trucks are there? Oh my God.